Syracuse football is a third of the way through its season and concluded September at a 3-1 record. But as the calendar flips to October, there are plenty of questions still left unanswered. With number 25 UNLV on the docket, did the Orange have some lady luck to play with the high-rolling Rebels on the road? Or fittingly, in Vegas, will the house have the edge? It's Syracuse, it's UNLV. We're breaking it down on Cuse Countdown, next.
New crew? New month? Who dis? I'll tell you who it is. Max Gifford, Della, Piana, Sam Reis. We wish you a happy October from Cuse Countdown. Now, I'll give our producing crew a lot of credit, gentlemen. They saved the best crew for last. But,
exactly right.
But along with that, they also kept you two in captivity. So before the show gets out of hand early, I want both of you to say something nice about each other.
I can't do that.
Your hair looks decent today.
Whatever.
His hair looks better than it did yesterday.
Thank you. I have nothing for him, so.
Yeah. It's show one.
Okay, well, by the end of the show, you better have something for him. We're going to come back to you on this.
We'll see about that.
Well, the good news is there was plenty of good things to talk about when it comes to Syracuse football this past week when the Orange faced the Crusaders of Holy Cross. Andrew, we'll start with you. Sort of your first thoughts in Syracuse's 42-14 win.
Well, my first question I have for maybe the rest of the group, I should say, is why was this game so close for the entirety until maybe the fourth quarter? The yard discrepancy in this ballgame, Sam, was unbelievable. Syracuse, 540 total yards of offense. Holy Cross, 203. The second half defense for SU saved this ballgame. 2 touchdowns, over 70-yard drives for Holy Cross in that first half. And then the Holy Cross second half offense, they had 5 punts, 32 total yards, negative 26 rushing yards. They saved this game.
I mean, they absolutely did it, Andrew. It can't be a 14-point game against an FCS team in the second half at your own place. I will say, Jackson Meeks was someone who did stand out. I'll give him a lot of credit. He was the highlight, in my opinion, of that game on the offensive side. Outside of that, there wasn't honestly that much to be impressed about, in my opinion. Sure, Kyle McCord threw for a bunch of yards, but he threw way too many times. I mean, that's way too many.
Does that say 53 on it?
I mean, that's absurd right there. Against Holy Cross, what are we doing? And listen, some of the interceptions as well, I did not like.
No.
Kyle McCord trying to force some throws sometimes, and I think that's because he doesn't have a lot of confidence in his run game, so sometimes he just tries to force them, and it led to some poor passes, Max.
I think it tended to, when it came to this Holy Cross game, felt like a win, but it almost felt like a loss in a sense, especially after that first half of play. But numbers can be a little bit deceiving. We just saw the numbers up there talking about the run game, which Fran Brown talked about coming into the game after the Stanford contest, that the run game needed to be established and needed to improve. This game, 125 yards on 39 attempts, but just about 3 yards per attempt. Sam, I already see you making that face. Kind of what were your thoughts on the run game for SU?
All right, was it slightly better than the game before? Sure. Is it where it needs to be? Not even close. I mean, listen, to Max's point, an average of 3 yards per carry, that's not going to cut it. Especially, this was a game against Holy Cross where you could really, play around, especially with LaQuint Allen, getting him a lot of touches and seeing what he could do. Now, he improved a bit, 16 carries for 81 yards, not too shabby, but they still passed the ball way more than they ran the ball, and I think that's because Fran Brown said the run game isn't doing what it needs to do, and he's admitted that after the last couple of games, Andrew.
That's what he wanted to establish in this Holy Cross game, right? That the run game needed to get back to where he wanted it to be. But only 3.2 yards per carry? That can't happen against FCS Holy Cross.
I mean, come on.
You only had 26 against Stanford. This was the week that you need to give the ball to LaQuint Allen and Will Nixon and just let the guys get going in the trenches. That was not the case. Only 125 yards on the ground just cannot happen against Holy Cross.
No. You guys mainly talked about LaQuint Allen. You brought up Will Nixon at the end there. You've seen Willis, another running back that also got in the running game for Syracuse. But the big story of the game, like it's been for a lot of the offense for Syracuse this year, is the man who's calling the plays, Kyle McCord. And in a game where Syracuse you thought was going to establish the run, McCord threw for 50 attempts, and he had 385 passing yards. He's now the only Syracuse quarterback to throw 4 games over 300 yards. And Andrew, he's already halfway to the single-season passing yards.
I mean, you met that mark. He is nearly at 1,500 yards, and you get to the point where you're looking at a guy that can get to over 3,500, maybe by the halfway point in the season, just because of the pace that he's on. Currently leads the nation in completion and yards per game. Max alluded to it, the only player in program history to have over 300 yards in 4 straight games. And in that ball game particularly, we saw him getting out of the pocket a little bit more. You see on this broken play to Umari Hatcher for the touchdown, Kyle McCord was not doing that at Ohio State. He was staying in the pocket, looking for Marvin Harrison. I see him being a lot more comfortable getting outside of the numbers, outside of his tackles, and making good throws on the run.
I don't know about that, Andrew.
Really?
I saw a mix. I mean, I got to give him credit. He's throwing for a bunch of yards, but this game was against Holy Cross. And I thought there were times, as I said earlier, where he was a little bit uncomfortable being forced out of the pocket. Listen, the O-line struggled. That was an issue. That didn't help McCord by any means. But with that being said, I still feel like there's times where McCord just tries to force it a little too much. Sometimes just run the ball and gain 5-6 yards and set up second and manageable.
Yeah, it's been back-to-back games where McCord has faltered just a little bit, a combined 4 picks in those 2 games against Stanford and Holy Cross. But McCord has been the stalwart for this offense pretty much the entire season thus far. But as far as the receiving game is concerned, it's been kind of a crapshoot, a little bit of a coin toss. And in this last game against the Crusaders, it was Jackson Meeks who was the name we were all talking about after the game, with a career-high 10 receptions and 161 yards. But you also couple that with who you thought was going to be the number 1 receiving option, Rondé Gadsden. Sam, he just has 3 receptions for 16 total yards in his last 2 games.
It's crazy. I would have never thought.
I mean, he's doing more blocking at this point.
He is
doing cardio.
That's not what he's here for. I mean, this is an NFL caliber talent. Make no mistake about it. You know, Jackson Meeks had a phenomenal game, kind of a confidence booster for a guy like him coming over from Georgia with the opportunity to really get right and give him some momentum going forward. But then on the flip side, to your point, Max, you have Gadsden, who he's still the most talented receiver on this team. Make no mistake about it. So I don't understand why he's not targeted more in these last couple of games. It's a little baffling to me, Andrew, because he is still the number 1 guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, after that Stanford game, I'm going to put him on a milk carton because I cannot find a Rondé Gadsden anywhere. 3 catches for 16 yards. This is supposed to be the number 1 guy in your team, but the good thing is you have more of a plethora of options. 7 different players making a reception in the ballgame. That's great to see, but a Rondé Gadsden, you got to get him going.
Yeah, you have to.
You seem to hear this after the game against Holy Cross. I mean, it was just Holy Cross. So you had the opportunity to get a lot of new players into the fold, and Syracuse especially did that on the defensive side of things, mainly headlined by King Joseph Edwards, who had 3 sacks, and then Jaden Bellamy, who was highlighted with a pick 6 last year against Pitt. Sam, he had another pick 6 this go around.
Yeah, I mean, give Jaden Bellamy a lot of credit. This seemed like a motivated individual, a confident player in this Holy Cross game, which is maybe something we didn't see, you know, in the first few weeks of the season. And Fran Brown talked about after the game how he kind of, you know, pushed Bellamy to work harder and, you know, deserve the playing time he got. And he delivered, you know, 5 total tackles. You see it right there. The pick 6 right on your screen at the moment. But King Joseph Edwards is the guy I was raving about after this game, and I'm still raving about it. Nothing fires me up more than a freshman proving his worth in a game like this. He was an absolute beast in that second half. 3 sacks. He should get more playing time, Andrew.
Yeah, that ties Kingsley Jonathan for the most since 2021. So I'm putting the king on King Joseph just because of performances like that.
I like that.
Those are good.
I like that. Crown him.
Yeah,
crown him. King Joseph
the old
Edwards.
LeBron old
He was
school.
all over social media.
Yeah, he's like a 5th recruiter. Why don't you?
I know, it was awesome. He was commenting on literally every single compliment that any Syracuse fan was giving him. All right, we've talked enough about Syracuse and Holy Cross, and that brings us to our first break here on Cuse Countdown. But when we come back, unless you've been living under a rock, there's been one of the biggest stories in college football around Syracuse's opponent this week in UNLV. We'll break down a ton more about that whole situation, a sticky situation, on the other side. Cuse countdown rolling on here in the CitrusTV studio. That's Andrew Della, Piana. That's Sam Reis. I'm Max Gifford. We appreciate you tuning in. All right, gentlemen, we've talked about Syracuse and their their victory over Holy Cross, but I mentioned it coming into the break. I mean, there's been one of the biggest stories in college football. Andrew, you're giving the eye right now. It's been around this guy.
That guy looks familiar. Yeah.
If you don't know this guy, learn the name Matthew Sluka. And it's almost funny that Syracuse played Holy Cross last week because this guy, Matthew Sluka, was the quarterback at Holy Cross the last 4 years. He was also the Patriot League Offensive Player of the Year, entered the portal in November and transferred to UNLV just recently. Was in the first few games for UNLV, but now is no longer there, but had a really, really strong start to the season, Andrew.
I mean, leading this team to a perfect 3-0 through the first 3 games, a guy that played in FCS Holy Cross, a team that Syracuse just played last week. He makes the jump over, potentially could have been a Syracuse quarterback as well, but a guy that only had a 44% completion rate, but he more did it so with his legs. His success on the ground, massive. Leading the country in missed tackles by a quarterback, a huge piece that UNL is definitely going to miss in the back half of the season.
Yeah, the whole thing's crazy. I mean, he was really good at Holy Cross. It's crazy to go from Holy Cross to UNLV to Vegas, by the way. And he was doing very well to start the season. I mean, you see the stats so far to start the year, effective in the air and on the ground. His team was off to, a great start to the season, 3-0, and then all of a sudden, boom, he says, I'm out of here. And the whole situation is kind of nuts. I can't believe it.
So now that my dashing analysts have given you a little context on Sluka's playing career, there are varying versions of what happened next. Sluka's agent told ESPN that UNLV didn't come through on a verbal offer of $100,000 from an assistant coach. That led to this statement on Twitter by the quarterback saying, I have decided to utilize my redshirt year and will not be playing in any additional games this season. I committed to UNLV based on certain representations that were made to me, which were not upheld after I enrolled. Despite discussions, it became clear that these commitments would not be fulfilled in the future. I wish my teammates the best of luck this season and hope the continued success of the program. While UNLV has been pretty quiet about the subject to the media, Rebels head coach Barry Odom finally gave a statement on Sluka's departure following his squad's win on Saturday.
I respect everyone's right to an opinion, and I won't comment on others' opinions or their motivations for expressing them. Rather, I'll say only that our football program complied with applicable rules, and subject to those rules, we're fully committed to the development and the success of every student athlete in our program.
As put pretty simply, it was an NIL situation gone awry. And there's plenty of good things that NIL has brought to collegiate athletes, but these are some of the lingering issues that have come along. And I know I said that was a statement. It was a written statement that he read off a piece of paper. But any sort of first thoughts on this situation as a whole?
Well, the best advice I could probably give to anyone listening right now is make sure you get your contracts written down on a piece of paper. Exactly. None of this verbal agreement nonsense that you learn from Accounting 101 from your freshman year when you go to the Maxwell School here at Syracuse University. You got to get this stuff in writing because then you have situations like this where promises are made, but they're not delivered, and especially in a weird UNLV sense, where you're talking about a guy that was promised $100,000 and only saw roughly $3,000 a month in his bank account. But again, all of this is a he said, she said matter because of the fact that Matthew Sluka and his team doesn't know if this was actually a contract or not.
Right. We don't know, all of the details in terms of how much money was officially offered, what was going on behind the scenes. I think it's a bad look all around. If you're Matthew Sluka, I get you're frustrated. To bail out on your teammates, though, when your team's playing that well, I think that's a very selfish decision, no matter what's going on with the money aspect of it.
Yeah, there's lessons to be learned on sort of both sides of the spectrum, both on the UNLV side, on the coaching end, because Barry Odom said the reason he didn't get that $100,000 was because he didn't make him the promise, but also Matthew Sluka's got to get that in writing.
Yeah, you have to.
I mean, you have to get that stuff in writing, but thinking of this in a grander scheme, because this is not the first time we've heard about NIL gone wrong. So in the broader scheme of college athletics, Sam, I'll go to you on this. What do you see sort of this spiraling or snowballing into in the future?
Disaster. That's what I see it. Because all of a sudden, and this is a prime example of it, and the biggest example of it so far, is that these college athletes are prioritizing what they're trying to earn and where they're playing to earn the most money over winning at times. I truly believe that. And you know, this is a great example of it with Matthew Sluka playing for a top 25 program, transferring from an FCS team and saying, I'm out after 3 games. I mean, this is worst case scenario for the NCAA. At the end of the day, we could see it kind of trending in this direction though, Andrew. And now all of a sudden other players, I fear, are going to look at this and say, hey, if he bailed out and is using a redshirt year to save another year and make more money, why can't I do that too? That's terrible.
It's dangerous waters you're slipping in, no doubt. But I think the right move you have to go to is there has to be a salary cap, because if you look at the numbers right now just behind me, you will see that there is a massive change in the landscape of this sport. Teams like the SEC, are making over $14 million a year just based on revenue alone right here. I mean, just look at this. $14 million from the SEC. Do the other 3 conferences have a chance? Absolutely not. You just talk about banking and best recruits because of your NIL collective. That doesn't make the sport fair at all. That's why we need a written system with a players' union, and that gets us in the right direction going forward.
And it's funny, you only have 4 programs or conferences in this case.
I think that adds up to $14 million.
Well, you talk about UNLV. They're a team that's maybe thinking about going from the Mountain West to the Big 12.
They're not there.
Or Mountain West to the Pac-12, I should say, which is apparently coming alive again. So we might see them on this chart in a couple of years. But just a crazy situation that has been in the national spotlight. Sluka's been in the national spotlight despite not even being a part of UNLV anymore. And that brings us to another break here on Cuse Countdown, because you don't want to hear us talk about Matthew Sluka because he's not going to be in the game on Friday, but plenty of others are going to be. We have more details on the other side of Cuse Countdown. Can't get rid of us yet? We're back on Cuse Countdown. Max Gifford, Andrew Della, Piana, Sam Reis. Gentlemen, we've talked perhaps what was the biggest story in college athletics these last couple of weeks with Matthew Sluka previously, and we've talked Syracuse football. Now it's time to talk the opposition for the Orange, UNLV. Andrew, I mentioned it at the top of the show. 4-0 for just the first time since becoming a Division I team in 1978. First time they've ever been ranked. And this past week, similar to Syracuse against Holy Cross, got a statement win against Fresno State.
Yeah, they blew the doors off the Bulldogs, 59-14 in the first game without Matthew Sluka. But the traffic that UNLV had to go with this week, unbelievable. You're dealing with a potential move to the Pac-12 and Sluka leaving. It's like both your parents yelling at you at the same time, and you don't know which one to answer first. That's the situation the Rebels were in. But 59 points, that's the most they've scored in a regulation game since 2022 against Utah State. In the defense, 4 interceptions. They were all over this Fresno State offense, and a big reason why is the guy on your screen right now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Haj Malik Williams was the story here.
Yeah.
I mean, Sluka gone, whole lot of headlines surrounding this team. What did the Rebels do? They go out and dominate this Fresno State team. This is a determined UNLV squad. I think even more determined now after, losing their original starter. This is a 4-0 squad that's going to test Syracuse this weekend.
And UNLV had been a program that had been struggling in recent years, but last year went 9-5. Yeah. And a big name you can attest to that is the head coach of the squad, Barry Odom, a guy that spent 4 seasons at Missouri in the SEC. Similar to Fran Brown, very good recruiter out of the SEC. He was exactly 25-25 with the Tigers. Then 4 years later, gets the job with the Rebels, and he starts out 9-5 and has only gotten better as he's gone on, Sam.
He has, and this is a guy in Barry Odom who, as you mentioned, spent a ton of time in the SEC, a top-tier conference. Did a solid job at Missouri, nothing special. Spent a lot of time with that program, both as an assistant coach and then eventually in the head coach role. Also had a stint at Arkansas, but I really think UNLV is the perfect spot for him.
Absolutely.
A Mountain West team that is under the radar, and he comes in Coach of the Year in the Mountain West last year, and already a really solid start to this season. The players seem to be bought into what he's doing.
And I think it's for the better that Sluka actually left, because the mindset that he brought in was absolutely fantastic. 2023 Mountain West Coach of the Year for a reason. A big guy in the SEC that took his recruiting ties out to Vegas, and it's worked out so far in his favor.
So UNLV's run into plenty of speed bumps this season. We talked about Matthew Sluka leaving, but they essentially just replaced him with a clone. Haj Malik Williams, QB2 to start the year, the man with 3 names. Haj Malik Williams, I'll say it once again. Another dual threat guy, Andrew. In his first game, he played at QB against Fresno State, had 182 yards passing, 119 yards rushing, and 4 total touchdowns.
That's a good line to have, don't you think? But I think we might have to rename Allegiant Stadium the Haj Mahal because of how well he played in that game. 4 touchdowns. 4 touchdowns for the young man in his first. It was his first FBS start after Sluka had his whole phenomenon. So he's sitting there in the back seat. He was named the backup just 3 days before training camp before Sluka got the job. But look at that performance. Over 80% completion percentage, over 200 yards on the ground, 4 touchdowns. You couldn't have asked for anything else from this guy, and he also made the great 8 list of the Davey O'Brien Award.
There you go. And for me, in this specific game for UNLV, it was about the balance that Williams showed, unlike Syracuse, who passes the ball way more than running it. Williams is a guy who showed that I can throw it, a decent amount, 16 times, and complete 13 of those passes for nearly 200 yards. And he also ran for nearly 120. So he's such a dual threat. He's probably the most dangerous threat on the ground for this UNLV team. Syracuse better watch out.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty nice flow into our next topic, because UNLV's top 2 runners are Matthew Sluka and Malik Williams. Both have over 200 yards.
Quarterbacks. Those are quarterbacks, not the running backs.
Those are both quarterbacks.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Next in line is Kylan James, who does not have 200 yards yet, but UNLV has a total, the 9th most rushing yards in the nation. Guys, tell me if you've heard this before. Syracuse going up against a very good rush offense. And by the way, it's another ranked team.
Oh.
Yeah, it's another ranked team, Andrew. That could be dangerous for the Syracuse team. And listen, I'm going back to Haj Malik Williams. Credit to the rest of this running back group, but Williams is going to be the guy, I guarantee, that runs the ball the most against the Syracuse team. And listen, it was honestly a close competition before the season between him and Sluka for that starting role. It's not a huge downgrade. It's not a downgrade, in my opinion, at all. So, of course, it's huge news that you lose Sluka, but you have this guy who is just so fast, so explosive, and you also got a threat I really like in Kylan James that you can go to as well. So it's a dangerous run game that this UNLV team poses.
They had 252 rushing yards against Fresno State. It's an offensive line with plenty of experience for those guys to get going. The offensive line had 56 snaps against the Bulldogs, 0 sacks allowed. That's more on your quarterback end, but you talk about an offense that loves to run the football, the 20th most attempts, and then Max alluded to it, a top 10 rushing offense. Syracuse, remember that season opener? They allowed 262 to Ohio. We could be looking at the same here, fellas.
And Andrew, depending on who you ask, sometimes offense is the best defense, but if you're UNLV, sometimes defense is the best defense.
I agree, yeah.
The Rebels are second in the nation in interceptions with 9. They also have 13 sacks early this year, and they haven't given up more than 20 points, and that was when they played Kansas. So talking about, I guess, this defense as a whole, coupled with a really good offense, makes for a very tough matchup, Andrew.
And you got to look at guys like Jalen Catalon that's stepping up to the plate right now. He's already tied for second in the nation with 4 interceptions. He has been the backbone of this defense so far. That the fact that you need to look at someone, I don't know if you saw that interception he had back last time against Fresno State, getting the toes down at the 1-yard line. Yeah. But then you take a look at a guy like Jackson Woodward, who's a preseason first-team All-Mountain West. He looks like he drinks 5 Bang Energies before he goes out in the field, because that's how much of a boom he hits with. There is talent all over this UNL defense, and I really think Kyle McCord is going to have his hands full in this matchup.
I mean, those numbers you're seeing right there pop out for sure.
Yeah,
we're only 4 games in. 13 sacks for this team, 9 total picks, headlined by Catalon, as you mentioned. And listen, Kyle McCord, some of those careless throws we've seen in the last couple of games, he can't afford to do that, because Catalon and the rest of this UNLV defense is going to take full advantage. It'll be something to watch out for.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly impressive that Catalon drinks half as many Bang Energy drinks as Sam Reis drinks in a single day. We'll see if he is a problem for this Syracuse offense, and if this UNLV offense is a problem for the Syracuse defense. But we'll tell you our predictions when we wrap up Cuse Countdown.
Life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome. Prediabetes does. 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, but with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. And you can change the outcome. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test today. Go to doihaveprediabetes.
Come on, it's not that hard.
My big man fingers are having a problem with these little tiny buttons.
Whoa, watch it there. Your blood pressure's gonna go through the roof.
Tell me about it. I'm trying to learn how to get it down. Instead, it keeps going up.
High blood pressure can increase the risk for heart attack or stroke. Learn how to keep yours at a healthy range.
Ever hear a voice command? Just say text barbershop to 97779.
That's not what I said.
Just give me that. Now my blood pressure's up.
Time flies when you're having fun. And unfortunately, our time is almost up. Max Gifford, Andrew Della, Piana, Sam Reis, wrapping up our coverage, talking about Syracuse's matchup against UNLV this Friday in Vegas. But after this matchup, Syracuse begins to take on a lot of ACC foes. So I guess we could call a final tune-up. Not much of a tune-up because you're playing a ranked team. But coming up, Andrew, what sticks out to you the most?
It's weird. I'm looking at the Pitt Panthers, that Thursday night game, October 24th. This is a team right now that is 4-0. Is in North Carolina this weekend. They could be 5-0 for the first time since 1991. A big reason why the Alabama transfer quarterback, Eli Holstein, has established himself as an early leader for the ACC Rookie of the Year. I'm talking about Pitt, like, you know, the team out in Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
they're good at football now, and they might be a dangerous Thursday night matchup.
I have to agree with you, believe it or not. Never thought I'd say Pitt football is that good. But yeah, the good news for Syracuse is they will be coming off a bye to get ready for that big matchup. That's definitely the one that will be the biggest challenge in my opinion. But I'm looking the week before that at NC State. If Syracuse can pull out this victory in Vegas, all of a sudden you're playing an NC State team that's on the down. You know, has not been playing well so far this season without their starting quarterback. That has to be a win. So if you can get a win in Vegas, take care of business at NC State, all of a sudden you're 5-1. Could be looking good into that bye.
Yeah, the Pitt game is it's almost shades of that Virginia Tech game last year. After the bye week on Thursday at home, and we don't have much time in the show left. So it's time to get to our score predictions, as I think the Mets just took the lead right now as we're talking. But Andrew, your score prediction for Syracuse and UNLV on Friday.
I got the Rebels in this one, 35-31 over the Orange. This is going to be a high-scoring game. Vegas believes it's going to be so. So I'm going to trust the team that's playing in the city to make that prediction for me. I got UNLV by 4.
I also have UNLV.
Okay.
Give me the home team Rebels. They're red hot to start the season. 30-23 the final score. They'll clinch the game on a late interception.
Oh.
That's my prediction.
Oh.
UNLV.
I got the sweep.
I got the Rebels 34-30, another 4-point win. That's UNLV money line, Syracuse spread. That's all the time we have on this episode of Cuse Countdown. Enjoy the game, everyone.